What is the actual difference between a strategic position and a strategic perspective? Companies constantly fail at innovation because they confuse changing a product with changing their core identity. Take McDonald's introducing the Egg McMuffin to capture the morning breakfast crowd. That was a change in position. It opened a new market, but perfectly fit their existing fast food assembly line. But imagine if they tried to sell McDuckling à l'orange. That wouldn't just be a new menu item, it would require a fundamental shift in their entire worldview. That is a change in perspective. Changing a tangible market position is relatively straightforward, but forcing a deep-rooted organization into a new perspective causes massive internal resistance. The ultimate strategic challenge isn't just inventing new products to sell, it's realizing when a massive market shift forces you to adopt an entirely new perspective just to survive. Which is exactly why traditional bookstores couldn't just add a coffee shop. They needed a completely new perspective to survive Amazon.
Hello everybody. Welcome to our model on crafting strategy by Professor Henry Mintzberg. As you know, Professor Mintzberg is Cleghorn Professor of Management at McGill University. He's an international renowned speaker and author on organization and management. He has been described by some readers as perhaps the world's premier management thinker. Henry has published plus 170 articles and 17 books, including Managers, Not MBAs. Let's review our management happenings. Because most people go through life undergoing a series of happenings which pass through their systems undigested. Happenings become experiences when they are digested, when they are reflected upon. That is a mantra in management. So please take out your notebook. Share and reflect a story about something that happened to you or around you at work, at university, during the last couple of weeks. Maybe this could be a story about a recent meeting, an event, or a notable interaction. Or we can follow up on any items from our last session. Let's review our topic agenda. We're going to review the topic, what is strategy according to Professor Mintzberg, the 4 P's, the 4 processes, following through, wrapping up, and ending our today's model. Total approximate time of our topic is 80-85 minutes according to your participation, to research, to your enthusiasm. So let's start with our topic overview. Strategy, defined as plan, pattern, position, and perspective, is used to derive 4 distinct processes of strategy formation: planning, visioning, mentoring, and learning. Each of them considered as it applies to your organization. And our session will conclude with an integrative model that combines all the 8 P's. What are our objectives for this session? To understand better the concept of strategy as pointed out by Professor Mintzberg, develop an appreciation for various processes of developing strategy. Consider this in light of the needs of your organization or department and what you can do about it. So let's jump right away. So please start defining strategy. In your own words, your notebook, with your peers define strategy. Define it, don't discuss it. Each of you just list a few words or phrases that come quickly to the top of your mind. about what a word means. Then let's compare this as a peer group. Let's spend a couple of minutes here. Let's begin with strategy as a plan, as pointed in our screen. How many of the words that you and your peers depicted were intentions from now into the future? For example, plan, direction, vision, target. This is how strategy is defined in our dictionary. This is also how most people see the world also. Some sort of consciously intended course of action. For example, to capture a market or promote more innovation. Strategy as a plan. Let's continue with strategy as a pattern. Please tell me, what is strategy that your organization, department, or you has actually pursued over the past 3 to 5 years? Would you be prepared to answer this question? Everyone is, even though the answer usually violates these definitions, and for a good reason. If strategies can be intended, surely they can also be realized. So defining strategy as a plan is not sufficient. We also need a definition that encompasses the resulting behavior. Is a strategy as pattern in action, some kind of consistency in behavior? For example, that these past 5 years your company went up market by increasing quality and raising prices. Start thinking in these terms. Strategies as deliberate and emergent. Go back 5 years ago and consider what the strategy was then. In other words, as intended. That you can probably do by looking at the long-range plan or the annual reports. Now comes the key question. Was the strategy realized as pattern in action over these past 5 years? Consistent with the strategy intended 5 years ago? In other words, did the organization do as intended? Discuss this briefly with your peers. Strategies, deliberate and emergent. The overwhelming majority say somewhere in between. That makes perfectly sense, because while a whole emergent strategy means there was no guidance or control, which is hard to believe, a wholly deliberate strategy, which so much of the literature and consulting prescribes, implies no learning en route. An organization can work everything out in advance, or leave everything to happenstance. How do you see the major strategies of your organization or department? Research, reflect. To what extent deliberate and to what extent emergent? Why is that so? Reflect and point your mentions together. We need a couple more definitions, 2 more pieces about the content of strategy itself. You consider Egg McMuffin, McDonald's breakfast in a bun. It was introduced to bring people into the restaurant for breakfast. Do you think the Egg McMuffin's a strategic change for McDonald's? Discuss this briefly. Groups of managers usually do. Some say yes. Of course, it's a new product and a new market. Others say no. Come on, it's the same old McDonald's. Let's review strategies, expositions, and perspective. Review a couple of definitions here. Now reflect. In your organization or unit, what are some of the strategies, expositions, and how would you characterize each strategy as perspective? How does it relate to the strategic and strategies you saw as deliberate and emergent? The way of Michael Porter, or the way of Peter Drucker, or the way of coaching ourselves. Reflect for a moment and point out with your peers. So let's review the Egg McMuffin syndrome. What is important about this distinction is that it is easy to change position, but awfully difficult to change perspective. McDonald's did not likely suffer great agony to introduce Egg McMuffins. Imagine, in contrast, introducing a McDuckling at L'Orange. This brief matrix shows the various combinations of changing positions and perspective. The most interesting box is probably the upper right, having to change perspective in order to retain position. Please remember the goal for today is to stimulate reflection and discussion around our work. It's okay if you don't understand every concept completely today. Can you think of examples in your industry or others of having to come up with a new perspective to retain an old position? Research, reflect, or point out. Some examples that commonly come to mind these days are bookstores having to compete with Amazon in order to sell the same products to the same people, or traditional airlines having to compete with low-cost discount airlines to retain their customers. Four processes from the 4 Ps. So now we have the 4 Ps for strategy. Put them on the two sides of a matrix, as below, and they suggest 4 processes by which to approach the making of strategy, as will be discussed. Planning, visioning, venturing, and learning. Please review planning and visioning. Read the following and then discuss these processes in order to generate a shared understanding. Please share any examples of each one you have seen these processes in action. Strategic planning, which is a more formalized approach to the process of strategy, or strategic visioning, closer to art than analysis. Pause, share, and reflect. You can even research with your favorite AI chat. Now let's review venturing and learning. Read again aloud and then discuss the processes in order to generate a shared understanding. Share any examples of when you have seen these processes in action. Strategic venturing or strategic learning. With some examples from 3M, Panasonic, or professional organizations, or strategic learning as an example of IKEA, which took 15 years to develop. So which process when? Most of our organizations use all of these processes, it's just a question of which it favors where and when. because these processes tend to sequence themselves over time. For example, first you venture to find out what works. From this you learn which can give you a vision, a perspective. This vision can serve as a basis for planning to pin it down and move forward. This leads to more venturing, to develop new positions within the strategic perspective, which may generate more learning all around. So let's reflect again, as the great Zelinsky said. What processes do your organization or unit favor? Have you seen this change over time? To which may it give more attention? How do you accomplish that? What can you do about this starting just now? This is from process to strategic statement starting now. So let's wrap up. Share your thoughts with each other. Was this a useful way to spend your time? Why? Did it change your perspective on strategy? What are your personal action items that you have researched, commented, or written? Are you clear about what you are each committing to do after this session? For starting just now? So that's it. We finished a coaching or self-topic crafting strategy. So any question, comments, ideas, please put them on our session chat. I will be glad to answer them or to reflect on them or to guide you. Please be sure to review the whole content again, what you have reflected, what were your conclusions with your peer group. So thank you. This was Victor M. Roma. See you in our next model. Goodbye.